That's a slide. And this slide is a word of caution for you all. What you'll hear today is a collection of tips and insights, and they're based on my experience and interviews with practitioners and my clients' experiences. But some of them might not apply to you. Some might apply to you, but they won't work in your organization. Some might apply to your team, some might not. Be careful. Take everything with a grain of salt. Be sure to check with yourself about what you want to do before you do anything. The essence of my talk today is that workplace politics affects risk management. Most of us know that, but we don't always appreciate how it helps, and we also don't fully appreciate how much it can hurt and how much it undermines our attempts to manage risk. We'll be introducing the concept of risk management risk, which is the risk that our risk management activities don't work or are flawed in some way, or that they actually make things worse. And I'll be introducing the 6 principles that I've identified for dealing with risk management risk. And finally, I have at the end 7 tips for controlling the effects of politics on risk management. Here's a problematic scenario you might recognize. A risk manager develops a risk plan. The plan is reviewed by management and by resource owners, and they object sometimes on various grounds. They might say a particular risk event is got the wrong probability attached to it. Usually they insist that it's much lower. They might object to the nature of the risk events or the cost of the mitigations. And as a result, the risk manager, who is often a project manager, might be a sponsor or someone even higher, revises the risk plan, and they move forward. The risk eventually does materialize as projected or in a similar way, and unfortunately the risk plan doesn't address that risk event any longer because of the modifications. And consequently, the risk manager is faulted for creating a defective risk plan. This is an all too common scenario. The graphic here is a lineup from a police event, but that doesn't actually happen, but sometimes you feel like it. So that's the kind of thing that I want to address. And to do that, we have 2 bits of terminology that are fairly obvious. I already defined risk management risk. I'll be talking about risk products. Risk product is any artifact of the risk management process. Could be sub-processes or the process itself, any analyses or strategies, plans, tactics, anything involving security that are part of the risk plan. We also need to get some clarity on what politics is. Workplace politics is what happens when we contend, usually with each other, for control or dominance, or when we work to resolve some specific issue. The contention between interest groups or individuals is over power, advantages, or leadership. Political activities can be creative, or they can be destructive. We usually think of politics as destructive, as a negative thing, but if you look carefully at the definition in the box there, it's neutral. It includes both constructive, healthy activity and the other kind. Politics involves the totality of the relationships between people. We have 3 goals today for risk management. One is that we want to control the influence of organizational politics on risk management. We want to make sure that what influence is there is constructive. Second goal is to understand how politics influences risk management and risk management processes. We need to understand that, obviously, if we want to have any influence on how organizational politics and risk management interact. We seek control, not elimination of political influence, because probably isn't possible to eliminate political influence since resources are involved. But also it isn't desirable. We want politics to be available as a tool for devising and amending and analyzing risk performance, risk plans and risk performance. Why do we care? Well, if you've ever been in one of those lineups in that graphic a few slides back, that's motivation enough. I've been there. But if we think about it organizationally, when a risk plan fails, we come upon a risk we didn't anticipate, or the mitigation plan doesn't work, or anything else that causes a failure. We investigate, and sometimes we do that in real time, which is not recommended. More often, and in a more constructive way, we'll do it in a retrospective. And that investigation is, the purpose of that is to find out why it failed so that we can fix whatever happened, maybe in the continuation of the project or in other projects. We want to look at other risk plans to make sure that similar flaws are not present in other risk plans. So it's a learning experience that we want to support. We also are concerned about uncontrolled political influence. We want to control political influence, but what happens if we don't? If we fail to control political influence, then what can happen is what I call here nefarious activity. And there are various sort of out-of-bounds behaviors that people engage in that if we don't control political influence, they've become much more common. Also, if we don't control political influence, the investigations that we do undertake don't really have the organizational health as their primary goal. They actually are seeking to blame somebody. And that's the kind of thing that we usually think of as dirty politics. So by controlling the influence of politics on risk management, we can reduce the incidence of these blame fests. When we don't control how politics influences risk management, whatever we come up with as a diagnosis of the failures is really not reliable because it's tinged by politics. So those are our motivations. Might wonder about why this topic is so rich, and the real reason is that risk management, unlike other project-related activities, is especially vulnerable to political influence. And this slide shows some of the differences between risk management activities and others. And one way to highlight those differences is to look at what happens when we divert resources from an activity. So if we divert resources from typical project activities, usually whatever was going on stops. The activity halts because we've taken the resources away. The people who were doing it get reassigned to something else, and everyone knows what happened. But when we do the same thing to a risk management plan, we take resources away from a risk management plan,